Hello everyone, I'll be talking about housing by the sea, the case of Jnah Uza'i settlement. I grew up in the southern suburbs of Beirut. I passed by the Jnah Uza'i coastline every day on my way to school or to work, always wondering what lied behind those small houses overlooking the Mediterranean Sea and intrigued by how its residents lived at such close proximity to the sea. Although looking and wondering never exceeded 20 seconds from the comfort of my own car, I did however envy the residents of the settlement who woke up every morning to the views and sounds of the sea. I finally decided to delve into this eccentric area and take an in-depth look onto its residents for the purpose of this research course. Instinctively, I wanted to understand how it came to be, its relationship with the sea, and how it interacts with the government. I immediately started with my literature review, making an account of what has been published on the topic by accredited scholars and researchers in English, Arabic, or French. I looked into articles and media reports and asked anybody I know to provide me with any type of information they had about that area. The first challenge was to give my topic a name in the Google and AUB library search boxes. Whether it was Uza'i, Jnah, or Beirut South Suburb, I really couldn't find much publications. Further research and trial and error led me to discover that scholarship labels and identified these types of areas as informal settlements or houses. I took that label for granted at first. I was then overwhelmed with reading many pieces of information in a short amount of time, but I was greedy to always know more and search for different perspectives on the topic. However, I did not find diversity in the literature's approaches. No publication tackled the settlement's relationship with the sea, or the sea's influence on spaces, nor did I find updated information on how the residents' conditions were. Most publications addressed the area from a bottom-down approach, identifying informal settlements as a problem and suggesting solutions. The literature strengthened my knowledge of the controversy as a stranger who didn't experience the field yet. It did address the coming into being of the space, drawing upon its history and its development onto its current urban context. Before the settlement, the area had virgin shores with chalets and people enjoying a long stretch of golden sand. Property conflict over its coastline dates back to the 1930s, where public beaches were first installed under the French mandate, and the first property questions arose. In the 1950s, some of the Beirut elite got ownership of what used to be public communal land under the Ottomans, and hence public beaches developed into privatized ones for middle-class goers who enjoyed the sea. However, the area being under the jurisdiction of the municipality of Burj al-Barajneh back then, the latter disputed with these private owners on the propriety of the land, and as a counter-reaction issued construction permits for settlers and encouraged them to reside on parts of the coast. Therefore, the coastline witnessed the first appearance of settlers who were rural migrants seeking better work opportunities in the capital in the mid-1950s. The crowds of these coastal settlements then greatly intensified during the Civil War, especially during the Israeli invasion of the south of Lebanon, forcing more displaced from the south to fully occupy the once sandy beaches of Jnah Uza'i until today. The area then densified with rural migrants, foreign migrant workers, and forcibly displaced people, and grew more into a city within a city. Throughout the years, academics and policymakers considered these settlements illegal and a temporary outcome of the civil war that should be eliminated. The government attempted at several instances to relocate them to upgrade the area but failed. In the 1990s, the government, with the help of consultants, created a public agency called Elisar to deal with plans to upgrade the southwestern suburbs of Beirut, including the Jnah Uza'i coastline. Its goals were to transfer the illegal settlements which lie on public land to other southern suburb perimeter by building housing units for them and reconstruct the free coast according to new urban planning, such as develop touristic sites and residential projects. Since its inception, several clashes arose between the settlers and security forces that prevented the demolition of their houses and their relocation, which made Elisar's goals unattainable. This area of contested ownership rights is a black box that raises controversy. Despite being a public space, the sea has been blocked, not by capitalist ventures, but by informal settlers. Its location on strategic contested land, its obstruction to accessing the sea, its non-compliant housing to current planning and regulations, and the poor living conditions of its residents led to labeling these settlements as informal. That is when I couldn't take informality for granted anymore and decided to deconstruct it. Hence, I decided I would let my material in question speak. Instead of using a top-down approach, I would address the controversy in a bottom-up approach, with my main center as informal housing by the sea, and its actors and agents would be academia and the government from one hand and the residents from the other. But after I reached out to Elisar project with no response, and I emailed a few professors at the UB, but they couldn't meet with me until May, the process was frustrating. I then managed to get in contact with an urban planner/architect that allowed me to interview him during the last week of the research. My research were now clearer and more refined. I wanted to deconstruct how informality in housing by the sea was experienced by the residents/builders and how it was theorized by planners and academia. I asked, what are the effects of the sea on the living conditions of residents of the Jnah Uza'i settlement? What is the vision of academia and planners towards the coastal settlement, and how is the sea transforming the space? I then searched for the characteristics of community development and prepared my interview question based on the sea. When it was time to experience the field and interview a few residents, I had to clear my head of most of the literature's labels and personal prejudices to understand the residents' answers in the most organic way possible. I even had to let go of my journal and pen if I expected organic responses. I conducted my visit to the field with a journalist who had known a family living there for a long time. We couldn't easily navigate within the settlement by car because of the high density of buildings and the texture of parts of the land, as most of the houses were built on rocky seashore or sand. We roamed into tiny streets. Some were cemented, others weren't. We passed by lots of small shops selling stationery, cell phones, and offering garage services and bakeries and hairdressers. The whole area was much more pedestrian-friendly than other parts of the sea, with most walkways and passageways connecting different houses. I couldn't see the sea, but I certainly felt its presence with the heavy wind and the smell of salt water and fish. Networks of chaotically built small houses were everywhere. These houses directed their facades to face the sunset on the Mediterranean horizon, yet kept their windows sealed and had no balconies. We followed these facades to reach the beach, and there it was, a beautiful sunset sight. Kids were swimming, others were fishing while the rest washed, and a few fishermen boats were abandoned on what was left of the shore. The city person in me thought, well, I could wake up to this view every morning. I almost forgot I was in the city. We head back away from the sea towards the house of the family I was planning on interviewing. It felt awkward to barge into people's life for research, or what could be perceived as arrogant curiosity. Through all of my interviews and observations with people living in the settlement, I discovered that the sea had become a living entity, a stakeholder within the settlement, and residents had developed a love-hate relationship with the sea. The sea had interacted with their health, their livelihood, their infrastructure, or the lack of it, their recreational activities, and almost every characteristic of their community. I first found that the neighborhoods of the area are still named after several beaches that occupied the coastline before the Civil War. Summerland, Coral Beach, Côte d'Azur, Saint-Simon, Saint-Michel, Riviera, Acapulco, Sands. And contrary to popular belief, the area's population is not made of Lebanese Shias only. Lebanese Sunnis, Syrian, Palestinians, Kurds, and foreign workers also live there. Only 2 political parties cater to these residents with regards to social assistance. It has 6 private and public schools and a couple of health and social centers. Today, the area falls under the jurisdiction of the Directorate General of Land and Maritime Transport under the Ministry of Public Works. And police patrols around the area regularly looking for recent illegal constructions. Residents with strong political connections are allowed to build, while those that don't have their houses demolished instantly. I then found out that the current houses were either renovated over time because the sea damaged their furniture and structures or flooded during winters. In fact, above the houses one could notice the tires and nylon fabrics put to protect the houses from water during rainy days. Most residents are fishermen depending on the sea for their livelihood, while others open small businesses in the area. The rate of unemployment is, however, fairly high. Children suffer most from waterborne illnesses and skin problems, odors, and mosquito bites from the sea and pollution. The main sewer of Beirut spills its waste in the sea every 3 days there. The area lacks sanitation management, and the improper use of septic tanks pollutes the sea and groundwater. Basic services such as electricity and water are provided by some designated members of that community who have connections with political parties. They call them the ministers of electricity, water, and construction. The sea is also part of their leisure time. Although lots of drowning cases occur, most residents are excellent swimmers, and children draw castles in the sand after school. These residents are grateful for the assistance provided by political parties, yet suffer from the neglect of the government. They live in an uncertainty and fear of being uprooted from their houses, For them, they were forcefully displaced and had no other place to go, and they are afraid that if the government doesn't give them enough compensation, they will not be able to live anywhere else. When I interviewed the architect-urban planner, I discovered that the sea was perceived as a homogeneous aesthetic entity of economic value. The expert could only describe and refer to high-end residential projects when answering my questions. When designing houses close to the sea in the sea is merely a perimeter or a border, and housing becomes less personalized. Furthermore, urban waterfronts create great interest for their centrality in the city, proximity to the sea, which has always attracted people for its economic value and aesthetics, and variety for different uses and activities. For urban planners, how to deal with the sea was a given. It was not organic. Housing should face the sea, and the closer you get to the beach, the higher the groundwater would be, which entailed more spending on infrastructure or the need to regularly pump water out from the foundations of the building. Otherwise, it would collapse. The closer you were to the sea, the saltier the water gets, and more would be spent on proper filtration and sanitation. More wear and tear could appear on buildings. That's why steel is not used on the exterior, and materials are tested before construction. Finally, the wind load is calculated to avoid windows from being shattered. I then started to understand that the sea was at the center of the informal-formal housing controversy. Questions rose to my mind. Is this the way people plan and build their urban waterfronts when there are no architects or planners involved? That so-called informal settlement looked to me like a village. While Beirut architects and planners have become obsessed with skyscrapers and the city turned increasingly inaccessible for low-incomers, Jnah Uza'i provides cheap two-floor high housing and is pedestrian-friendly more than any other parts of the city. Academics and government have made a categorical divide between the informal housing sector and that of the formal housing. That framework allows them to claim that these settlements are abnormal. New modernist urban planning prioritizes the appearance of the city rather than the social, political, and economic relations that are in fact taking place. It does not recognize the system and order that are created by the residents themselves. According to new findings, informal housing is housing in the making, a form of shelter that reflects low-income dwellers' knowledge and abilities on how to make the city. This self-help housing was a solution to the housing problem rather than a problem itself. As mentioned in City Debates 2013, the issue has of course a political dimension, which is the right to the city. Embedded in the act of informality is a political movement towards reclaiming one's right of the city. Occupying land and building in violation of the law may reflect poverty and vulnerability, but it also carries some level of political agency in which low-income people reclaim their right to the city despite exclusive housing markets and urban and building regulations. This research should matter because it attempts to bridge the gap between informality and formality in housing by the sea. It attempts to propose an understanding of the Jnah Uza'i coastal settlement and provides an in-depth look at its actors and environment, all the while addressing a silent, fluid actor that has contributed in shaping the space, the sea. By raising awareness on this controversial area, this project initiates a discussion on informality in a novel perspective. A better understanding of informal housing by the sea might encourage academia and policymakers to think differently about these controversies and look beyond preconceived notions to promote innovative ways to address them and make the city more inclusive. Finally, this research experience made me realize that, in research, one should rid himself of all preconceptions, those that are at least personally recognized. Things are never as simple as they are perceived in the beginning and shouldn't be taken for granted. One should stop searching for the problem because maybe there is none. Research is not only conducted for policy, research carries a responsibility. It starts from an uncertainty and has an objective to inform. It shapes people's understanding of the world around them. Research is an enduring and hard process and shouldn't be taken lightly. And one should look for different approaches and making non-human actors speak, defying the current research trend. The process is endless and infinite, and there are no limitations to knowledge and research. And finally, writing and keeping a journal is primordial because writing is another form of research. As an end note, I also learned that there is a clear gap between the state-of-the-art scholarship, as Dr. Nicholas called it, the literature, and the public, when in fact the former should serve the latter. Research, unfortunately, takes people and their experiences for granted at times.
Thank you.
Thank you.